Representative, I guess the easiest question first, you just sat through a 2-hour meeting that you chaired in House Finance. What's your initial reaction to the feedback that you had there?
I think it was expected. We had a lot of folks who came out that were very positive on the bill, and we had a lot of folks who had some concerns. I sat and watched some of the Senate hearings, so I wasn't terribly surprised by either side or some of the conversations that either side wanted to have. There were some moments where things got a little spicy, so I would have liked maybe a little less vitriol and a little less impugning of both my committee and other members of the legislature, but I understand that people want to get their voice heard.
The idea that 100,000 people signed up or filled out forms is, from where you sit, is that accurate?
It's not. And I tell you, Chris, I have always looked at testifiers who sign in just as important as folks who come and actually testify. The difference is that, it's easier. You can sit at home and you can sign in pro or con on a bill. And since I've been here post-COVID, there have been a lot of folks signing in to testify pro and con on a bill. And my counterparts on the Republican side like to say, we've had this many thousand people sign in against a bill or sign in for a bill. And I've always taken that as kind of, that's democracy. That's what happens. This time I was contacted, I believe it was Friday. People started saying, hey, I'm noticing my name is signed in on this bill that you're going to hear, and I didn't sign in. Or I'm noticing my name and I'm signed in a position that I didn't take. Odd. I gave them the email address of the person that takes care of that on the committee. Said, hey, that must be a mistake. Just go ahead and change it. Well, by Sunday, it was a lot more than just a few. And by Monday morning, I saw the press conference that you probably saw, and I received a letter that was stating almost 200 people had fraudulently been signed in a position they did not take. At which point, my staff went through and just did a basic Control F function on the spreadsheet, found over 19,000 duplicates, exact duplicates. We did not go in for a near duplicate or same address, different spelling of a name, Catherine spelled this way or that way. So needless to say, a further investigation needs to be done. I do believe at this moment that piece of the democratic process is really being called into question. Clearly, with 19,000 duplicates and over 200 fraudulent sign-ins, it is not a number. That 100,000 number that you just mentioned is not a number I can trust.
So help me out here, because I think we're talking about a couple of different numbers. There's
yes.
people who sign in to testify,
Yep.
and then people who are signing in with a letter or just saying, hey, I'm pro or con on this?
Yes. So there's a couple ways you can do it in the legislative process. So one, you can sign in to come in person and testify. You can sign in to testify on Zoom, virtually. You can also sign in with just your position. No comment needed, just, yep, I like that bill, nope, I don't like that bill. And then of course you can sign in and you can actually send a letter, send some type of written testimony. So what I'm talking about here are people who have signed in not to testify, and that's what that 100,000 number is, right? We didn't have 100,000 people signed up to testify, but we did have 100,000 people, it looked like, signed up against the bill. That number is incorrect. And again, that's based on a cursory investigation just from staff doing a basic Control F function find of duplicates. In addition to people being fraudulently signed up, to give you an example, Senator Victoria Hunt, my colleague in the Senate, apparently signed up con on this bill. Well, talking with the senator, she did not sign up on this bill. In fact, I think one of the things she had mentioned to the press is, why would I sign up to testify on a House bill, right? She could just come over and tell us how she feels. But she, in fact, is one of the co-sponsors of the bill that came from the Senate. She absolutely did not sign up con. Someone did that manually with her name, which is fraud.
That seems like a problem with the state system.
Well, so I think it's a recognition on our part now that there's a potential problem, right? There is a way to game the system. You hope in all democracies no one games the system. In this sense, it did. I will say I was happy to hear my ranking member, Representative Orcott, said he was just as interested in figuring out, where this fraud and where this abuse was potentially coming from. So I'm hoping that the legislature can open an investigation. I know A.G. Brown has been contacted, and some folks are asking him to investigate. I'm not sure where that'll go. But as far as the House goes, we are absolutely going to look into this.
So cup half full, cup half empty. The other side is already saying, well, okay, even if there were those many fraudulent or fake numbers, that's 19,000 of 100,000. There's still 80,000 people that say they don't want this.
Well, and so that's where, as I'm sitting here talking to you, 24 hours ago, we did Control F and found 20,000 off the bat. I am not saying that all of the rest of the 100,000 are actually true and verified. And so that's the piece why we need an investigation to see how many of those folks who signed in are actually signed in the position that they want to be taking on the bill.
I heard you say at the end of the hearing that amendments were due by Thursday. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the process here is you have to request them for our staff. They need to request them by Wednesday at noon. They have to be posted publicly by Thursday at noon.
And then what's the timing, do you think, for getting this to the floor for a vote?
So we're going to exec it out of my committee on Friday. We have an 8 a.m. Meeting, and after it's exec out of my committee, it'll go to rules, at which point our floor leader and our leadership team will schedule it for a vote sometime in the future.
Could be next week.
It could be next week.
Do you expect amendments?
I do. I absolutely do. Yeah, there will be amendments on the bill. I expect that both my Democratic colleagues, my Republican colleagues will have something they want to say about the bill and how it progresses out of the committee.
The one thing that keeps coming up, and I see it from the other side, is the idea of the removing of the emergency clause, that it would stop it or prevent it from going to a referendum. Is there the potential, or would you support a clause to allow this to go to a referendum, to a vote of the people?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it really is necessary to have an emergency clause. We are in a deficit. This is a structural change that we do need to see go forward. So I do support keeping the emergency clause on there. Now, one thing I love about our state, actually many things I love about our state, but one thing is our initiative process. I have no doubt that there will be an initiative more than likely drafted, and we will probably see some type of initiative on the ballot that addresses this bill.
So again, to clarify, if there is the emergency clause in there, that's
Yes.
not preventing this from going to a vote of the
Absolutely.
people.
I mean, the people in our state, you can do an initiative for anything. You can do an initiative to say that Chris Daniels shouldn't wear a purple tie on a Tuesday. Now, I may or may not sign that initiative, but anybody can put that on.
And you're also prepared for a legal challenge on this.
I'm assuming that there's been definitely rumblings in community that folks want to see the courts weigh in, so I absolutely assume that will happen.
So with those two things said, the idea there could be an initiative or a legal challenge, do you think it makes sense to balance a budget based on a piece of legislation which may not hold up in a court?
I do, and one of the reasons when you look at legislation like this, you look at any legislation that we pass, we are occasionally opening ourselves up to legal decisions, right? So going to court, people taking us to court. We're currently in court over bills that we passed last year. Folks say, hey, we don't think this is legal. They have a right to adjudication, going before our courts to argue their case. This is just like those bills. We believe we are on firm legal ground. I believe we are on firm legal ground with this. If someone would like to challenge that, they absolutely can take us to court. But at this moment, as a policymaker, as a chair of House Finance, as a legislator, I believe this bill is absolutely legal.
Why go through this when you know that there was just an initiative 2 years ago that the people said they don't want an income tax?
The initiative did not go to the ballot. The initiative was signed by many a Washingtonian. The initiative came to the legislature. I voted on that initiative. That initiative was very, very broad. And I think broad-based, deeply graduated income tax is not something that Washingtonians want, and I stand by my vote at that moment. I do believe our votes should be taken seriously, and as a policymaker, I take my vote in that moment very seriously. That was a very, very broad statement around an income tax, and the way it was worded, I think I agree. Washingtonians do not want a broad-based income tax that would go down to the lowest levels of income. This is a targeted tax on the income of high earners in our state, and I believe that's a very different conversation.
So to that point, you've heard it. People say that you're just opening up the Pandora's box here, that if you pass a millionaires tax, that eventually it'll be whittled down to people making $500,000 or $250,000 a year, and that this is just opening the door for a broad income tax.
Yeah, I've absolutely heard that. I've heard that from constituents. I've heard that from colleagues. I don't believe that to be true. We've got a very clear mandate through some very deep and some very good polling that we've had that says people do want a tax on high earners. They do want a more fair tax code. They do want a tax code that's less regressive. This is a nod to that. I do believe that that folks are afraid. They don't trust us right now. It breaks my heart as a policymaker. It breaks my heart as a mom serving our state in this capacity to hear that folks are like, no, we don't trust that you're going to just keep it to millionaires. I'm telling you, at this moment, this is what we're doing. This is a high earners tax. This is not a tax on everyday Washingtonians. This is not a tax on anyone, any household making less than $1 million. And I don't believe in the near future we will see a tax that goes below that. People said that with capital gains. And we, to this date, we are still taxing the same types of people, that same number of people that are being taxed with capital gains. That has not grown. We have not extended that beyond our initial subset of Washingtonians. We're going to keep our promise with this one too.
And my final question is the argument that's been made that, okay, you pass something like this, the Seattle Mariners aren't going to be able to sign a free agent. The Seahawks aren't going to be able to sign a free agent. That people who are making over $1 million playing professional sports are not going to want to come here. That this is going to impact the sale of the Seahawks or the return of the Sonics. How do you respond to those arguments?
41 other states have an income tax. 41 other states have a tax similar to this on high earners in their state. So I think that argument just does not hold water. That is like saying that we clearly don't have professional sports in California, which has a much more aggressive income tax than us. New York, much more aggressive income tax than us. Illinois, I mean, the list goes on. There are 41 other states with an income tax. We are the outlier at this moment. I think we're going to be just fine recruiting very talented athletes across the board with this tax, just as those other 41 states are as well.